dudes had a direct connection to Dallara. And he was saying at the time, this is August of 2021, that he would be surprised if they got the next-gen car out there in time. He was surprised that there were enough parts to even put enough cars together. Thank you guys for watching us on Facebook, YouTube. We are a big fat radio show. We've been doing this for 22 years. Maybe you've been listening to the Freak Radio Network for those 22. Thank you, Freak Nation. And you can chat with us on YouTube and Facebook. I made the comparison to the concussions in the NFL, specifically with your quarterback for the Miami Dolphins, Tua Tagovailoa, and how the issues with Kurt Busch and Alex Bowman. By the way, you knew Alex Bowman didn't run this weekend because he had issues from his wreck last weekend in Texas.
Yes.
Right. And StattMann brought up a good point. There's all NASCAR fans know that there are big issues with this next gen car. And a lot of people are trying to put their finger on it, but StattMann sent us a damn good email this afternoon. I thought we need to hit this. And it addresses some issues with the next gen car because something's got to be done, StattMann, with this car or something to protect these drivers from a lot of people's perspective, to protect these drivers a little bit better.
Well, it turns out something is being done. Brad Keselowski, who's part owner in the Roush Fenway Racing, has a great piece on racer.com. He didn't write it, but he's the feature in the piece. And he's talking about some of the changes and the transparency that he's finding out as an owner that he didn't know as a driver. In fact, there's some testing that's supposed to be happening in Ohio this week on the rear zone of the car. But the issue of the car came about for a lot of reasons. One, it was done by a company in Italy called Dallara. Now, they make sports cars and open wheel cars, and they make road cars. All these cars are put together with a lot of structural rigidity, and that had more than they found in some of the cars in NASCAR. And because of the pandemic, when this car was going together, they didn't get a chance to test it a lot. And the testing that they did do was testing at solo cars on the track instead of a lot of cars in a pack like they race. It's kind of like being in physical shape, but not in football shape. The car needed some changes, and those changes are in the process of happening now. There was some, I don't want to go too deep into this. I want to give you a chance to ask questions if you do, but the car was created to meet two needs. One, to create some parity in the competition, and two, to cut the cost. If you had to go to buy all the pieces, then that would cut the cost for the teams. But it didn't work that way. Turns out the teams are paying more because they're having to wait and find out, and these parts aren't coming easily. Nobody expected them to throw them against the wall as much as they do.
Crasher, let me jump in here real quick. And Richie, my apologies. I was, not that we needed to hear it again, but I was on the Hot Rod Power Tour last year with Continental Tire. Continental Tire and General Tire are both partners. So if you say, well, Kenny, you're General Tire. Well, yeah.
Same company.
Yeah, same company. And I had a conversation with a couple of gentlemen not too far from the Dallara shop, Crasher.
Yes. There's a Dallara racing shop where they produce a lot of things just down the street, maybe 2 blocks from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
And
so, yeah.
When Stat brought this to my attention, how do I say that? I don't want to get any, screw it. One of these dudes had a direct connection to Dallara. And he was saying at the time, this is August of 2021, that he would be surprised if they got the next-gen car out there in time. He was surprised that there were enough parts to even put enough cars together, because what he was hearing and what he was, I guess, seeing was they were having issues even connecting some of these new parts with the next. As basic as that sounds, connecting some of these parts to where they match up. then you can wrench it down. They were having issues with, they were getting no seat time in these things, specifically what Stat's talking about. And these are two dudes directly and indirectly involved with Dallara, at least right outside of Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So when StattMann brought up the fact that these things, it just reminded me that, yeah, these are being designed by Dallara, that really, Stat, the closest thing, Crasher, that they've had to stock cars was with sports cars, right?
But that's still pretty significant.
Yeah.
It's just that it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, StattMann, the design that NASCAR wanted, the modular design that they wanted, they couldn't get away from it being rigid because of those particular specs that NASCAR gave them. Is that correct?
That's part of it. Now, I made a lot of phone calls to friends who are team owners and drivers, and even some champions in multiple series, and they are surprised at this, and they're looking at it and saying, how is this going to be changed? And some of the old car. And we talked about, let me take a moment here. We talked about head problems, concussions in the new car, but they had people that retired because of concussions in the old car. You remember Jerry Nadeau, you remember Steve Parks, Ernie Irvin. They drove in the old car and they had problems. So it might be more endemic to the industry than it is to the specific car. Now, a lot of drivers are saying the car's too stiff, and it might be, but maybe the car was designed to race instead of crash. And that's a real issue. They drive these cars against walls and against each other. And, they make sports cars, and these sports cars go against walls and each other, and the drivers aren't having the same issues that they do with the NASCAR Cup car.
See, that's exactly where I have an issue with this, because you just said it. Dallara is making sports cars. Dallara is the exclusive supplier for IndyCar. The crashes that those drivers are going through in those Dallara-backed cars are arguably faster and more severe. Heck, Tony Kanaan, not too long ago at the Indy 500, had an 80G hit. I believe that was in turn 1. He walked away. No concussion. So
Now,
there's something else going on here.
Well, the difference in the open wheel car is that when it goes against the wall, stuff flies off.
Yes.
And that's the energy that is released when that you hit the wall at 80 Gs.
Right, but it's not happening in these stock cars.
Yeah, it's not happening in the stock cars. So that's a problem. And maybe the testing that's going to happen this week in Ohio might be something that they could find out, what's causing some of this stuff. And what I would hate to see is going back to the old car.
Yeah, no.
That would, space frame with tubes and all that stuff and truck arms. And it's just insanity how they race these cars for so long. I like this car. I like the look of it and I like the handling of it. But again, I don't drive it. I just like the way it's possible to be raced. But the problem is, I never heard this about a race car before. It's too stiff. And maybe there's some changes, and what might potentially could be minor changes, but talking about changing everything and throwing it out and starting over, going back to the old car, that would be the worst thing that could happen.
But isn't that what some drivers like Denny Hamlin need to do to try to get heard or to try to be heard, is just make ridiculous statements like that? Because there is no possible way that they're going to completely scrap this car. Far too many millions of dollars were invested in this. What it needs to be about is finding the problem. Yeah, and 3 years of testing. Yeah, finding the problem and fixing it fast.
Now, the one thing before we get away from this, I think, and it was suggested by a couple of people that I talked to, is that some testing needs to be done in two areas. One is the soft walls that they've been sitting out in the elements for 20 years. Now, I don't know what kind of maintenance goes on with these things, but if all the accidents involve the soft walls, then maybe the soft walls need to be looked at and find out whether or not they've outlived their usefulness. We don't know if they're supposed to last 20 years with no changes. Maybe they need to be updated. And the other is that I've noticed that a lot of the drivers, especially in NASCAR, use different head and neck restraint systems. And maybe they have to find out if these head and neck restraint systems are different for the different cars, and maybe for the increased speeds that they have, since they introduced the head and neck restraint systems again almost 20 years ago, right after the Dale Earnhardt Sr. crash.
Coming up in 17 minutes, his name is AJ Allmendinger, Xfinity Series pilot, who again runs part-time in the Cup Series. We'll ask him about that, and of course his big Xfinity win in Talladega. He'll be here in the Freak Nation. And of course, Robert Height, NHRA Funny Car winner from Worldwide Technology Raceway. He'll be joining us here in the second hour. StattMann, I'm glad you brought that up about the softball technology and the head and neck restraints. And again, I'm going back to the National Football League, and it came to light that the NFL Players Association fired the neuro doctor?
Neurospecialist. Yeah.
Yes, right. And it's going to force the NFL and the NFL Players Association to step up their their cognition, or step up their protocol to examine these players when it comes to concussion issues. And you've got to evolve with what's happening on the field or on the racetrack. And I didn't even think about softball technology. We were praising that. Remember, we were bitching and moaning within our 22 years of the development of racing cars and walls and helmets and Hans devices has been nuts, has been just nuclear in growth. I like that one. But the fact that they haven't really gone back, at least as far as we know, and tested these walls for what these cars are doing, maybe they have. We just haven't heard about it, but I'm just glad.
Well, it's a good point, because I just made the reference to Indy cars and how the Indy cars completely break apart, and that's what dissipates the energy away from the driver and out into the ether, basically. However, Joseph Newgarden this year at Iowa took a massive hit, and if I remember correctly, that was also backing in, and he fell down at his trailer not too long after that. He had a concussion. So you're right. Maybe the walls do need an updating. That's something we can ask AJ about as well.